Father in heaven, so grateful for this day, for the breath of life that we all have this morning. We praise your name and glorify you. We pray that all things we do today will be to glorify you. Thank you for all those that are here this morning, for their willingness to get out our busy schedules to study your word and to worship you. Pray that you be with all of us as we study this morning. And as we worship you, that we'll be mindful of your Son Jesus and his death on the cross, and how much glory we should give to you, and praise and honor. And be with all the teachers downstairs. Thank you for the efforts that they've put into preparing for these classes and the students. Continue to bless this congregation. In Jesus' name we pray.
It's not on it, Dale.
Oh, that's the one thing we forgot to do, Bill.
You have to get the other, the remote, get the small.
This one?
No.
This one?
Yeah, now stand in. You have to go over here, get under it. You have to get under it and turn it on. Just press and release.
Green button.
There you go.
Modern nectology. What was our first plague? Blood of the Nile. And then the next three. Who wants to do the next three? Quick. Karen.
The frogs, fleas, and flies.
Frogs, lice, flies. That's one way I remembered it. FLF, fluff. Frogs, lice, flies. Or gnats, but lice works better. So blood, frogs, lice, flies. And then Tom went over those last week. How many of those did the Israelites have to suffer in?
Well, first three.
Verse 3, yeah. So the blood. Now, did you think the Israelites were able to drink water during that time? It says that the Egyptians had to dig up water by the river Nile. Do you think the Israelites also had to dig up water? Yeah, so that's kind of implied. Frogs, Israelites suffered the plague of frogs, more than likely. And what do you think that is? Why do you think God made the Israelites go through that? Bill?
Because he made it clear that not only did Pharaoh and the Egyptians needed to see his power, his own people needed to see.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Yeah, I think that's a good point. So that even his people would see it. And we see here, the blood was duplicated by the Egyptians. The frogs was duplicated by the Egyptians. And it says it even occurred in Goshen. And then the lice, not being able to duplicate it by the Egyptians, also occurred in Goshen, where the Egyptians lived. So I think Bill's right in that it shows the power of God even to the Israelites. And then we get to the fires. No more plagues will come along upon the Israelites. So ideally, they didn't have to deal with any of this, but we'll talk about that more. So now we get into our next one, which is the plague of the livestock. The fifth plague, livestock disease, or you might call it pestilence. So blood, frogs, lice, flies, FLF. And then I got something for the next three. Who likes peanut butter and honey sandwiches? Peanut butter and honey, pestilence, boils, and hail. So fluff, PBH. Maybe I'll help you remember them. The Lord said, "Let my people go, that they may serve me. For if you refuse to let them go and still hold them, behold, the hand of the Lord will be on your cattle in the field, on the horses, on the donkeys, on the camels, on the oxen, and on the sheep. A very severe pestilence, and the Lord will make a difference between Israel and Egypt." So specifically mentions which animals are going to be affected? The ones in the field. And it kind of similar to the hail, because it said the same things. The ones that are left out are going to be hit. So, and specifically mentions that there's a difference between Israel and Egypt. The Lord is not going to affect the cattle in Goshen in the fields. See, this is the same problem, Bill, with the formatting.
Yeah.
So animals in the field will be affected: horses, donkeys, camels, cows, sheep, and goats. Will not afflict the Israelite animals. The Lord, and here, Deanna and I were talking about this morning. The Lord specified when and how that this will take place. Basically warned Pharaoh. Did Pharaoh heed? Did anyone heed? The plague happened how and when God said the Egyptian animals died. Now, what does that say about us and our word to one another? Our word. The Bible says, let your yea be yea and your nay be nay. Right? Should we give vows and promises as Christians? We're not supposed to. But we are supposed to let our yea be yea and our nay be nay. Our word should be our vow. So we need to keep that in mind. And when God says something's going to happen, how and when, it does, doesn't it? Yeah. Pharaoh sent men to see if the disease had afflicted the Israelites, and not one of the Israelites' animals died. So it's almost like Pharaoh was checking up on God, because God told him this is what's going to happen. It's not going to afflict the Israelites. So Pharaoh actually sent men to go check on that. And that should, to Pharaoh, say, wow, that's pretty powerful that he can afflict just our animals and not afflict the Israelite animals. You know, God in different ways shows his power. And it's very similar to Jesus when he was going through all the different miracles. Like every time Jesus had a different miracle, it increased the apostles' faith because it was always something different, something new. Power over demons, power over life, power over water, blood. So similar with here, God continues to show his different power. So it's not that he's able to afflict these diseases. Now he can specifically decide who he wants to afflict these diseases upon. Who had their hand up? Joel?
I don't think you're talking just historically. I mean, you know, my mind is trash, so I can't remember where, but someplace in the New Testament it says these things written in earlier times were written for our instruction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Romans 15:4.
Romans 15.
Right.
How do you think this plague negatively affected the Egyptians, having all their livestock in the field killed? How many different ways would it have affected their daily lives? Cindy?
Economically,
Yeah. Sure. Mario?
This wouldn't be the first time they were losing a lot of their livestock. They've already had to replace it a couple of times.
Mm-hmm. Right. So it's expensive. Plowing their fields, right? Yeah.
Let's say labor.
Labor.
Yeah.
I mean, they were plowing fields. They were pulling carts. I mean, that's what the animals did. So it's really affecting their ability to, in their economy. And we're going to see even Pharaoh's people, his officials, have had enough. I mean, these plagues are destroying our country. Basically what they told him. Kind of like what we all say now about our president. Destroying our country. The Lord made Pharaoh continue to be proud and would not let the people go. This is the fifth plague. Pestilence. Or diseased livestock. Any comments, questions about this one? Nick?
We're combining everything that everybody said about how it was affecting people. So it was affecting the economy, it was affecting labor or workforce, it was affecting transportation or travel.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically the entire infrastructure of any kind of civilization.
Animals would have been their infrastructure. It was kind of like if something happened to our trucking industry. Like we all kind of saw a couple years ago with the backlog because the ports in LA got clogged up. Trucks couldn't get in and out quick enough. So we saw that affect our economy.
Also, too, the time frame that all this is happening, there's no time to recover. Everything's going back to back to back like a domino effect.
Yeah, right. Lamar?
I think also, it doesn't say, but I would imagine in your minds, the Egyptians probably was questioning Pharaoh's authority in the sense of, this is happening to us because of his heart being hardened.
They're figuring it out. Yeah. They're starting to blame him for having a stubborn heart. Yeah. So, back to our chart here. The disease of cattle. We went over, I've talked about Hathor, probably the most prominent one of the Egyptian gods in regards to bulls and cows and cattle. Affected their property, death of their livestock, so it just affected them in a lot of different ways, the disease of the cattle. But this next one might not destroy anything, but it's going to be very inconvenient. The boils. You can imagine, if God's going to afflict them, it's not going to be just one or two. It's not going to be a light affliction, is it? Anyone ever had a boil? And what is a boil?
Ouch.
Yeah. It's an infection, usually under the skin from the hair follicle. And it gets infected underneath, produces pus, itches, burns. You can't sit on them, you can't touch them. They're very painful. Then they burst. Yeah, basically what Andrew's been dealing with is basically starts as a boil. So yeah, you're right. Job had them, and Job was scraping them with pottery just to get some relief. So you can imagine how this felt and affected and it would have been all the Egyptians. I would imagine even Pharaoh.
We couldn't even stand. We couldn't even stand because it hurt so bad.
Was on their feet then. Couldn't. And we see that with his officials. So the sixth plague is boils. The Lord told Moses to take a handful of ashes from where they burn bricks. I think this is symbolic. This is how you're afflicting my people. So now I'm going to take that and I'm going to use it against you. Moses throws it in the air, and then the wind just spreads it everywhere, and that creates boils on the people. The ashes will blow like dust all over the land of Egypt, and the dust will cause painful boils to appear. And I like how he did that right in front of Pharaoh. This is the ashes from the brick, from the oppression that you've caused on Egypt. And it's going to cause boils. Now it's going to cause you oppression and affliction.
And it's kind of neat. Again, he says to Moses, he says to them, rise up early in the morning and stand before Pharaoh.
Yeah.
And you got to remember when he says, you know where Pharaoh's going to be early in the morning. So Pharaoh is still doing what he does every day, going down to the Nile and worship, to intercede with Pharaoh, with the gods. So every day, early in the morning, Pharaoh goes down to the Nile. And so the Lord tells Moses, early in the morning, you know where Pharaoh's going to be. So go down to where Pharaoh's going to be. And
That's a really good point, because Moses doesn't have to knock on the door of the castle. Hey, I got something to say. No, Pharaoh's already outside doing his thing, worshiping with his God. So Moses just has to show up. So that's a real good point. Otherwise, I don't think he would let Moses in. The boils will afflict people and animals. It will even afflict the magicians, so they will not be able to stand, like you said. But Pharaoh was too proud and would not let the people go. What's the difference between God hardening his heart and he was too proud? I've seen the difference sometimes in the wording.
I think it's his free will.
Yeah.
Well, it's his character. That's the kind of person that he is. He's a very man of great pride. And in Proverbs 16, verse, first thing that God lists is an abomination to him is a proud look. So.
Yeah, that's why I listed this, because I think it's real important. The fact that maybe he looked down on the Israelites, and the fact that they were slaves, they were beneath him. So that type of pride. And the pride comes too when you're king over everybody. There's that pride. When you're put in charge, sometimes that can go to your head. And there's that type of pride. So we should never look down on anybody. We should never elevate ourselves as well in any position that God has given to us, because He's the one that's put us there. He's the one that's given us that position.
In the first five plagues, it was Pharaoh who hardened his heart. And in this plague, it was God who hardened his heart.
That's right. You see kind of that switch, right?
But the other place, I think there are three talking about hardened. The middle one just says his heart was hardened.
Yeah. So you see kind of different wording throughout the different plagues, but all kind of meaning the same thing. But here it just talks about his pride, and another one we'll see God actually increases his pride. So frogs, lice, flies, PBH. We did the peanut butter already. We did the boils, and now the hail. So the boils. The Egyptian god of healing, Serapis, Imhotep. That Hotep, that kind of sounds familiar. If you've ever watched a lot of movies, you hear that often, that Hotep. Yeah, so it's kind of ominous when I hear that or read that. But goddess of epidemics affects the physical bodies, and the magicians in the end could not even appear in court, let alone duplicate it. So they're kind of taken out of the picture here mostly, aren't they? Yeah, there's no more of Pharaoh. Can my magicians duplicate it? So the next one is the hail. Why is it red? Why is there fire?
Fire.
Yeah, it said. That's what it said. Hail mixed with fire. Some versions say lightning, but some say lightning and fire. So imagine this. It's not just a hailstorm. Seventh plague. God told Moses, get up early in the morning and make Pharaoh listen to you. This is what Tom was just saying. He just bugs him. Gets up early. Tell him, let my people go and worship me. If you refuse, I will send the entire force of my plagues against you. I will punish you, your officials, all your people. Then you will know that there is nobody like me in the whole world. I could have killed you already. God is saying a lot to Pharaoh in this particular plague. Almost like God is getting fed up with Pharaoh. And here, he says, I'm going to send my entire force of my plagues on you. And you really see that in this one because of the fire, the thunder, the lightning. And thunder and lightning indicates God's presence. Bill?
Yeah, it says there that then you will know there is nobody like me.
It's fascinating because God used the prophet Isaiah, said to his people who had turned away from him. And in Isaiah 46, that's the exact same thing that God said, so that you will know that there's no one like him. So he had to do it to people with Pharaoh specifically. He also had to remind his own people about that.
Yeah. I like what he says here to Pharaoh. I could have killed you already. I could have removed you and wiped you off the face of the earth. That would have been easy for me to do. But that wouldn't have served God's purpose, would it? But I let you live. Why? For this purpose I have raised you up. I have let you live. I have kept you in your... And that's what I was talking about earlier. When we have positions of authority, God places us in those positions. God allows us to be in those positions. And that's at least how we need to view it. And so we shouldn't get a proud body over things like that, because those are given to us by God. Even if you're super talented in an area, those are gifts from God. I was just talking about the other day my aunt. She can paint murals she does for rich people. She paints murals on their walls in their homes and on their ceilings. So she does for a living. Like, I didn't get any of that. I didn't get any talent. But yeah, God just blesses different people with different talents. Some have musical ability. Some can just play basketball real well. Let's look at Steph Curry and this girl, Caitlin Clark, just broke all the records for college basketball men and women. She's just a shooter. She can shoot. God has blessed us all with different talents. He says, but I let you live for the purpose I have raised you up, that I may show my power in you, that my name may be declared in all the earth. Not just in Egypt, not just in Israel, but everywhere. For we know that when the Israelites eventually go to Jericho, when they eventually go to the land of Canaan, do the people in the land of Canaan know about God? Do they know these stories? Oh, yeah. So God, this is exactly right. The stories have gotten across the entire face of the earth. And so God was right when what he said here.
Yeah, when the spies went into Jericho, and they had told them, the hearts of our people.
Yeah, exactly right.
You know,
Uh-huh.
it's not only have we heard about your God, we're scared.
Yeah.
And affect them.
I'm just wondering, what stories of great deliverance and power are they able to tell about their God? And what a crushing blow that should have been. How do you continue on?
Yeah. They've never seen anything like this. Other magicians have probably done things that made it look like it's their gods.
They haven't been delivered from any of this.
No, they can't deliver them. That's kind of the point we made last week. They can't deliver them from any of this. They can maybe duplicate some of the stuff. Who else?
Of all the things in the Bible, this is one of the stories that even people who don't know the Bible too well, they kind of know about plagues.
Yeah.
They're not able to list them, you know.
Right.
They,
Most people know that story now, even if they're not too familiar with the Bible. They know the plagues of Egypt.
Yeah, even with the death of Joseph, the Canaanites knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's
Right. God then warns Pharaoh about the upcoming hail. He tells him, this is very similar to the one we just did, where he told God, this is what I'm going to do, when I'm going to do it. He tells him to bring the people and the animals in from the field. God tells him this. I'm going to bring this plague on you, but I'm also going to give you an opportunity not to be affected by it. Get indoors. That's all he's telling them. That just tells me that people are stubborn. You've seen six plagues so far that God has done. You don't believe that he can produce a seventh? It boggles my mind. God then tells Pharaoh about the hail. He tells him when and where it will happen. He tells him to bring the people and the animals in from the field to take shelter, and any person or animal left out will be killed. There's never been a worse storm in the history, probably not of Egypt, but probably of the world.
Not too different from today. I mean, they saw all the other previous plagues, but they were probably thinking, well, it can't get any worse. It can't be any worse than what we already saw.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, people are worried about hurricanes and other disasters that are happening. A lot of people just think, it can't get much worse.
Have any men been killed up till now? With any of these? Before now? Blood, frogs, lice, flies, pestilence, that was cattle. Boils, inconvenient. So really, probably no men have died. It's been inconvenient. But now, God's telling them, this is going to kill any person left outside. So I'm letting you know. So this is not on God if anyone dies.
Kind of goes back to his pride, because God's warning him, God's telling him what he should do to avoid some of this wrath, and his pride says, I'm not going to listen to this whoever, because in front of his people, that would demean him. And similar, whether it's husband, wife, or whatever, sometimes we're told of an idea that's a good idea, something we should probably heed, but I'm the man of the house, I would not be told.
So stubbornness is basically pride.
Yeah.
God's telling him what to do to keep his people safe. Just like in the Word, God tells us what to do so that we are saved.
Yeah.
And we have that choice.
Right. So we have a choice. And I listen to a lot of podcasts, and people say to the preacher, why would God make us just to send us to hell? The preacher's whole point is you still have a choice. God has given you a way to get to heaven. If you accept Jesus, get to heaven. If you deny Jesus, then that's your choice to go to hell. So it's always a choice. Everyone among the servants of Pharaoh who feared the word of the Lord hurried to bring his servants and his livestock into the houses. But everyone who did not pay regard to the word of the Lord left his servants and his livestock in the field. So you had a lot of Egyptians now, kind of on both sides. The smart ones, the ones that would listen, and that's kind of like the word today, isn't it? We all know so it is today. We all know the parable of the sower. Very familiar with that. You can spread the word, but some are going to fall on wayside where it's not even going to take root. Some are going to fall into the stones, and some are going to fall into the thorns, where they take root, but then they're choked out by the cares of the world. But then we know the good ground, and we see sometimes you never know who's going to have the honest heart and accept the word. So we can never judge somebody by what we know of them. Supposedly, Jeffrey Dahmer became a Christian before he died. The worst of the worst. I mean, and Paul calls himself the worst of sinners, doesn't he? Saul at the time. Then Moses reached out with his staff, and the Lord sent thunder, hail, fire that darted to the ground, and the Lord rained hail on the land of Egypt. So there was hail and fire mingled with hail. So very heavy that there was none like it in all the land of Egypt. It even says that the hail broke the trees. We had hail here fairly recently, last year. Did you guys see it? Or it was early this year. And they were just little tiny things, weren't they? But still, you didn't want to be caught out in it. And then I saw a video recently online of a guy driving on the highway, and you could see all the cars around him, and the hail literally breaking their windows. That was scary. The only place this did not hit was Goshen, so God saved Goshen. The Pharaoh sent for Moses and Aaron, and this is different for Moses, or for Pharaoh, where he actually says, I have sinned, which is interesting. I mean, that's a lot for someone to say that, isn't it? Maybe he's swallowing his pride a little bit. I don't know. Do you think he's playing Moses? Telling Moses what he wants to hear?
I think he could be in conflict with himself, because don't we question ourselves and, I know I've done this.
And it may just play out in our brains, because that's what happens to me. That we, back and forth. I'm back and forth in my head all the time about different things, whether it's sinful, right, good, bad, ugly, it's just always. So it could be that he is finding some sincerity, but he's
No, I think you're right. I think this is us in a nutshell. That when we're desperate, we seek God and we plead for God. As soon as things get comfortable again, we go back into the world and we forget God. And that's all of us in our lives. That's our pattern, and I think that's Pharaoh's pattern. My people have done wrong. Pray to the Lord on our behalf. We have had enough thunder and hail, and I will let you go. Thunder's scary. Been woken up in the middle of the night by that. Loud. So when you see that lightning, you know what's coming. And you can tell how far away it is. But sometimes that thunder is just a crash, loud. Lamarck?
We were talking about this in our Wednesday class. They tried to compare with Moses and Aaron, the Egyptian magicians. But Pharaoh never went to his magicians and said to remove these things.
No, or duplicate it. So Moses said to him, as soon as I go out of the city, I will spread my hands out to the Lord, and the thunder will cease, and there will no longer be hail, so that you may know that the earth is the Lord's, But as for you and your servants, I know that you do not fear the Lord God. So Moses maybe kind of knew Pharaoh was just playing a game. And he was just saying what Moses wanted to hear. Question, how did Moses get out of the city unscathed? He was still hailing. He says, I'm going to raise my hands when I get out of the city. Well, Moses had to walk through it, didn't he? Do you think there was an umbrella over God? Yeah. So Moses can walk through this and without getting any hail on him. What do you think that hail looked like? How big do you think that was? But the problem was here, not only did it affect man and beast, but their crops. So the crops that were budded, the crops that had already had produced, were destroyed. But the wheat and the spelt that had not ripened yet were saved. For now, until something else gets to them. When Pharaoh saw that the rain and the hail and the thunder had stopped, he sinned again and hardened his heart, he and his servants. So he did not let the sons of Israel go. That's kind of a crazy storm. That's a current. That's a hailstorm. So it came out on the third day when it was morning that there was thunder and lightning, flashes, and a thick cloud over the mountain, and a very loud trumpet sound, so all the people who were in the camp trembled. Remember when the Israelites were scared when Moses was on the mountain because there was thunder and lightning? It usually represents God. God is present. And so, to me, the hail was the first one that just showed God's power to the people of Egypt. And do you think the Israelites were able to see this and hear this? Of course. They were right there. Probably the hail didn't affect them, but they were able to see it and hear it. This is some modern day hail. Those are baseball size. This is the video I saw, just crushing through it. So if the Egyptian plague was worse than this, imagine hail bigger than that. Because the intent was to kill. Not to hurt, not to damage, but to kill. So I can imagine they were, and to break tree limbs, they would have had to have been big. So at least grapefruit size and bigger. Mm-hmm. I mean, we have insurance for hail damage, right? But this, yeah, I've never been in hail like that. So blood, frog lice, flies, PBH, hail. Isis and Seth, we all are familiar with those Egyptian gods. Isis and Seth. Speaking of Seth, where is Seth? He didn't come, huh? It's good to see you, Danielle. So the historical uniqueness of this storm, Pharaoh confesses his sins, but later changes his mind. So some interesting facts here. All right, the next one, 8th plague of locusts. And that's probably what it looked like. You know, when locusts came over, and this was something that they'd probably seen before, when locusts would come over, it would literally blacken the skies. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Pharaoh. I have hardened his heart and the heart of his servants, so that I may perform these signs among them, that you may tell in the presence of your son and of your grandson how I made mockery of the Egyptians, how I performed my signs among them, so that you may know that I am the Lord." So now the Lord is telling Moses, I've done these things for you to tell your kids and for them to tell their kids, for these stories to be passed on. And they, like you said, they have been passed on. Most everybody on the planet just knows the story of the 10 plagues, whether they believe it or not. We know these stories, and they show God's power. So it's done exactly what God has expected it to do. And He expects them to tell the stories. We know when Joshua went into the land, it says there rose up a generation that did not know God, because what did they stop doing? They stopped telling these stories. That's why I really appreciate Dwayne Gandy. You guys all know Dwayne Gandy? Yeah, that's his kind of his thing is the stories. Tell the stories. Joel?
They remember starting with Red Sea after 400 years. I don't know how long this was before they were fighting the Philistines, but the Philistines remembered in 1 Samuel 4 and verse 8, it said they said, "Help, who can save us from the mighty gods of Israel? They're the same gods who destroyed the Egyptians. If you don't, we will become the Hebrew slaves just as they have been ours."
Mm-hmm. So the Philistines remember. Good point. The Lord said to Pharaoh, "How long will you refuse to humble yourself before?" There's that pride again. "Let my people go, so they may serve me. For if you refuse to let my people go, tomorrow I will bring locusts into your territory. They will cover the surface of the land so that no one will be able to see the land. They will also eat the rest of what has survived." We talked about in the last plague. What is left to you from the hail. "And they will eat every tree which grows in the field. Then houses will be filled with them, with the houses of all your servants and the houses of the Egyptians," not the Israelites. Pharaoh's servant said to him, "How long shall this man be a snare to us?" So this is when you really start to see now his own people are bugging him. They're telling him, "Let the people go. Let them go. How long are you going to allow this to happen? Don't you not realize that Egypt is destroyed?" We see it financially. We see the landscapes change. The stench. I mean, it's just being destroyed. It's not the same country that they had before. God's going to leave it in shambles, and he's going to leave them broke without an army. Pharaoh said to Moses, go serve the Lord your God. And then he says, well, who are you going to take with you? You know, there's like a little caveat here. So go serve the Lord your God. I'm tired of this. Well, who are you going to take? And Moses said, we shall take our young and our old with our sons and our daughters. We shall take our flocks and our herds, for we must hold a feast to the Lord. He says everybody's leaving. Tom?
I think it's really important to note here that after Pharaoh's advisors say, you really got to do something because Egypt is destroyed.
Yeah.
That they brought Moses and Aaron back.
Yeah.
After they had, talked to Pharaoh first, and they left. Moses and Aaron left, and then his advisors say, you really got to do something.
Mm-hmm.
They brought him back.
Brought him back, yeah.
And then they're talking to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said, Pharaoh's talking to him, and then Pharaoh's talking to him, and Pharaoh says, well, how's this going to work?
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when you see that God is hardening Pharaoh's heart right there, because he's starting to say, how's this going to work?
Yeah. So Pharaoh says, so may the Lord be with you when I let you and your little ones go. Watch out, for evil's on your mind. So Pharaoh's basically saying, no, you can take the men, but I'm not going to let you take anyone else. For now, only the men can go. Because in his mind, if he left the women and the children behind, what are the men going to do? They're going to come back. So in his mind, if he can at least satisfy that part, but Moses said, no, we've all got to go or no one. So when the locusts settled in all of Egypt, do you think the locusts were in the land of Goshen?
No.
They were carried by an east wind all day and night, and in the morning in the east wind. Did it specifically say they weren't affected? Didn't say. This one doesn't say. So it's possible that the locusts affected Goshen, but we don't know. And what would have been the negative of it? They would have lost their crops. They would have lost their trees. But who cares? In God's mind, what? They're leaving. And then why would they, if all their crops were good and their trees were good, what would Pharaoh do when the Israelites left? He would go raid theirs, and he would have food, and he would have plenty. So maybe it was in God's plan to destroy it all. So they covered the surface of the sky. They ate every plant, every green thing. And then Pharaoh says, please forgive my sin again, and plead with the Lord. And just as an east wind carried him in, a west wind carried him out. And I love this, not one was left. That's a miracle in of itself. There wasn't even one locust when God got rid of them. So let's keep moving on here. So now the locust, now the darkness. In the locust, Pharaoh offers a compromise. The compromise is rejected. Pharaoh again confesses his sin. And this, from my reading, Sennacherib and Serapion were the two Egyptian kings or gods that this was against. Now darkness, Re, or who? Ra. Okay, might be another name for him. Amun-Re or Amun-Ra, Otum. Oh, these are other names that were kind of mixed with Ra. So when you're thinking of darkness, this is what you've got to think. Because if God gets rid of the light, when there's no light, it's pitch dark. And I think God would have blocked out the sun, God would have blocked out the moon. And there's a depiction of Ra, always with a falcon head, with a sun disk over his head. Another depiction of Ra. Arguably the most important god to the Egyptians, Ra is the sun god and is one of the oldest deities in ancient Egypt. He was later merged with others such as Horus, the morning sun, so Horus Ra, Amun-Ra, the noonday sun, and Autumn Ra, evening sun. So he morphed into multiple gods. He embodied the power of the sun, was also considered to be the sun. Envisions this as a great god riding his barge across the heavens throughout the day and descending into the underworld at night in his barge. Ra was already established by the time of the Old Kingdom. Remember the ancient pyramids of Giza, and continued until, like all the other Egyptian gods, was eclipsed by Christianity. The pyramids of Giza are associated with Ra as the Supreme Lord and Creator God. So notice that creation is even mentioned with Ra, who ruled over the land and of the living and of the dead. So arguably, they're most important and head deity. Then Lord said to Moses, reach out your hand, and he didn't warn him on this one, did he? Reach out your hand towards the sky so there be darkness over the land, darkness which may be felt. I think that means pitch black, that there's no light. Why else would they be frozen in their homes? He did not warn him about this plague, just like he didn't warn him about the gnats and the boils. There was darkness for 3 days. They did not even see one another. You know, when you're in a dark room, in a dark cave, and there's no light, you don't want to move. The other day I went into my office at work and there's no windows. And if the doors are all shut, I can't see my hand in front of my face. I'm trying to find the switch, and I ended up in my closet. I'm like, okay, this is not right. But that's what happens when you can't see. You don't know where you're at. You don't want to go anywhere. They didn't go anywhere for 3 days. Israelites had light in their dwellings. Do you think this affected Israelites' surroundings, but not their homes? Thought about that perhaps because God blotted out the light from the sky, that it was dark, but they were able to have light in their homes. That's kind of the impression I got. Pharaoh sent for Moses. He said that the Israelites can go, but they cannot take their animals. So before, you can only take your men. And Moses said, no, I got to take them all. And now he says, okay, you can go with your women and your children and your men, but you can't take the animals. And Moses is like, well, that's what we use for gifts. That's what we sacrifice with. Moses said they needed the animals to give as gifts. They cannot leave one animal. And then Pharaoh gets mad. Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he was not willing to let them go. Get away from me, he says. So now Pharaoh's mad. Be careful, do not see my face again, for when you do, you shall die. So now Pharaoh's just done with Moses. Moses is not willing to bargain. Of course, there's no bargaining when you hold all the chips, is there? Moses holds all the cards, you might say. There's no bargaining here. Of course, Pharaoh wanted to bargain, but he's not going to get his way because God's in charge. God's going to get his way. Moses said, you have spoken correctly. I shall never see your face again. Wow. How powerful is that? You have said it right, Pharaoh. We're never see each other again. Darkness. Thank you, everyone.
Dude.